Perfect. So my name is Shane, I'm from the Canadian RV Association, and just really want to thank everybody for coming out today and for coming to this seminar. We always try to have unique things happening at the show, and we're really thrilled to have Dan and Melina here to talk about their experiences. And what's even neater is to do a live podcast. This is a first. We've never done this before, so no pressure. Anyway, thank you very much for coming, and thanks to Dan and Melina for doing this.
Thank you, everyone. So, and hello to everybody. We are live streaming to our YouTube channel right now as well, and recording, and this will come out as a podcast later on this evening for everybody who listens to our podcast on a regular basis. So I will start by asking if everybody here knows that 50% of campers never roam more than 160 kilometers away from their home. And what if I told you that staying close to home is removing the opportunity to have some pretty life-changing experiences on the road? So as Shane said, I'm Melina, this is my husband Dan, together with our two kids, Fiona and Isla. We are the RV Canucks. We are Canada's RV podcast. And over the last 10 years or so, we have gone over 40,000 kilometers across North America, from coast to coast to coast. And we started this podcast to share our stories about life on the road as weekend warriors. One of the main reasons that we started this podcast is because there were no voices in Canada on the podcast channels for Canadians. We saw a lot of Americans, there were a lot of full-timers, there were a lot of timers, and really nobody who had, a mortgage to pay, and kids in school, and long weekends and summer vacations to take the trip. So that's why we're here today. And what are we going to talk about, Dan?
So what we want to talk about today is we want to talk about being a new RVer, but we also want to talk about how does everybody travel a bit further. So whether you're a new RVer or whether you're a seasoned RVer, how are you going to travel further than that 160 kilometer and unlock all of those experiences that we're really all looking for?
Okay. And stick around to the end. We have a couple of prizes for anybody brave enough to ask questions. So, yeah. So let's talk about the typical barriers to why. Ooh, I lost it. Oh, there we go. Typical barriers to why people don't go far or why they don't buy an RV. And some of those reasons are familiarity. They are not comfortable with destinations that they don't know. Maybe they're uncomfortable crossing a border. There's a perception that it costs too much to travel far away from home, especially compared to other types of vacations. I think there's, uncertainty about what happens on the road if something goes wrong, if somebody gets sick. If somebody gets sick, if something goes wrong with your rig, and there's a desire for, other types of vacations, all-inclusives, etc., that people feel they can't get with RVing. And I think, we're going to talk about all of those reasons throughout this chat, but I think when it boils down to it, I think a lot of this just comes down to confidence and getting out on the road. And the ironic thing about that is that sometimes confidence is built through adversity.
Yeah, really adversity is what builds your confidence and makes you smarter about this. Our very first big trip, the time we really pushed that 160 kilometer barrier, we were going to Pancake Bay. And Pancake Bay is about an hour north of Sault Ste. Marie on the shores of Lake Superior, beautiful place. And we decided to make this trip a loop, and we left on a Friday evening, and we're going through Michigan. And just set the stage for a second. You're going down, you've cleared the border, it's after dinner, the kids are starting to doze off, the sun hasn't quite set, we're on the interstate, it's a nice peaceful drive, and there's a little commotion up ahead on the left-hand side. So I do the right thing, and I move over to the right-hand lane, and I cruise down a little further, and as we get closer, the reason that there's commotion in the left-hand side is because on the right-hand lane, there's a dead deer in the middle of the road. But on my right is, a steep ditch, and on my left is the commotion. And on my left is the commotion. And so I looked at Melina, I said, honey, hang on, we're gonna have to take this one square. And the deer went right underneath the truck, and you felt it, but the truck was fine. It had the skid plate, a little bit more ground clearance, and we had a little pop-up camper, and it was an 8-foot box, and it bounced 2-3 feet up in the air, and it came right back down hard, and we drove on a little bit further, and the bikes were slowly drifting out of view. So as the bike slowly drifted out of view, I pulled over, and I got down on the ground, and Melina was holding a flashlight, and you kind of look over your shoulder, and there's a big sign, and it says, "Prison area, do not pick up hitchhikers." So by now the sun has set, and she's making sure I don't get hit by a car. And fortunately, the Michigan State Patrol came by, and he didn't get out of his car. He turned on all the lights, got on his loudhailer, and asked me what was I doing. I explained what had happened, and there was a pause. Simultaneously, Melina gave a bit of a ah, and ran back into the car. So fortunately, he was a good guy about it. He said, "Well, that's fine, I'll keep the lights on." We got everything kind of ratcheted, strapped up, and we made it to our destination that night. Probably an hour late, but we made it, and we survived, and the trip still carried on. I think that's the important part.
Yeah, I think there's one important part of the story to me. I don't think I screamed and ran away. I think I calmly walked back to the truck to explain to our kids what was happening. But I think what that really taught us was always have ratchet straps in your truck because you know that you're going to need them. But we talked about this story on our very first podcast, and one of the lovely things about that was we got a listener email shortly after, and we had a listener who listened to us, and they had just had essentially a head-on collision, and their trailer was totaled, and it really shook them up, and it really scared them, and they were having conversations between them of what do we do now? Do we even replace this trailer? And they were having kind of a crisis of confidence on whether to get back on the road or not. And they listened to our podcast and found it, and they wrote us this lovely email about how that story, gave them the confidence to kind of keep on going. And they replaced their trailer, and they're back on the road, and they're having a great time traveling around. But I think it's really those important stories when things don't go right. That teach you a little bit about how you can handle this, right? We were 4 hours from home on a 1-week vacation. We could have turned around. We could have just said, that's it. We're going to call it. We're done. And we didn't. And I think, that has led to, all of the adventures that we've had so far across North America.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of stories, right? Like everybody, we've got a good food story. We went to Letchworth State Park just east of Buffalo, maybe an hour or two. Wrapped up a wonderful weekend at a great state park, and we went to dump the tanks, and not enough water came out of the black water tank. And unbeknownst to us, the weekend prior, the girls' U11 hockey team had gotten into the trailer and used a lot of toilet paper and created a flood. So we MacGyvered a solution. We got the tanks drained because we certainly needed to. We weren't going to live at the dump station for the rest of our lives, so. We managed to get the thing dumped, we managed to get home, we enjoyed the trip, and we like to have a good chuckle about it now.
Yeah. So with all of that being said, then how do you build confidence on the road, right? And I think it comes down to some key things. And, we have a couple of rules that we live by that we still do no matter how many miles we put down or how many kilometers we put down. And one of those is managing, when you have to get into tight spaces or gassing up the truck.
Yeah, so gassing up the truck. Your trip is going to fall apart, not around the campfire. We can all survive a rainy night at the campfire. It's going to fall apart if something breaks, if you get a flat tire, if you get stuck not having gas. And a couple of the tips we use is we always use Google Maps if we're not familiar with an area. We can kind of scope out ahead. What does the gas station look like? Is there enough egress to get in and out? And sometimes we pick a different gas station. Or we'll also travel with a spare gas can. And we've got 20 gallons of gas on the back of the truck, and it's not going to get you far, but it got us through Atlanta in a traffic jam, and there was a disaster. So there's lots of little things you can do in terms of say gas.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that really used to stress us out a lot when we started our travel was the fact that we tended to book somewhere we wanted to stay. And then we would get down the road and we would be really tired and we would have to push on because we made a reservation and it was really stressful and everybody was hungry and tired and upset, and we very quickly realized that was not the way to do a long trip. So very, very, very rarely, if ever now, do we actually book the place we want to stay when we're en route. And there's a couple of things that we do to make sure we always get a spot, but it takes the stress off. So traveling is more about how we're feeling and how much we want to continue on through the day versus like we've booked somewhere, so we have to get down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I think we use a great app. It's called RV Parking. It will give you everything from the Walmart parking lot right up to the 5-star RV resort. It will give you reviews. You can write reviews. Like if I can figure out how to use it, you can use it. It's really, and it's free. So it's an awesome app. 100%. We would recommend that anytime.
That's great. Hopefully this one works better for me. So let's talk about pre-trip checks.
Pre-trip checks, I mean, I think the big thing we do, like if you're gonna run a marathon this spring, I don't think most of us are, but you wouldn't just jump into it and run a marathon. What you would do is you would kind of stretch and warm yourself up. So like everybody, we do a short trip close to home. Get your trailer out of storage, your RV out of storage, set up the campsite, make sure that everything works, that nothing broke over the winter, make sure that, you haven't forgotten something, that, it works well. Right? Because if you have forgotten something, you're probably close to home, you're close to Walmart, Canadian Tire, something like that, and that's one of the good things you can do.
Yeah. And one thing that I say, and I hear this a lot, and we all, we're married, we've been married 23 years, we have certain roles that we have in the house. He takes out the garbage, he does the dishes, he does the cooking. I participate, but we all have spousal roles that we fall into. And some of the things that I think are so important from an RVing perspective is try to eliminate those as much as possible when you're traveling. Your travel partner should know how to hitch up, they should know how to drive, they should know how to park, they should know how to parallel park if they need to, they should know how to empty the tanks. And I think that's one of those things, like we never have to worry about if somebody falls ill because the other person knows how to do it, and our kids know how to do it, and they have had certain roles they've played. They level, they will like pull on and off the blocks, they will put the jack stands up and down, and now that they're driving, they're learning how to drive and tow the trailer, and I think that's so critical, so that you're never caught in a situation where you're stuck and you can't do anything. And I will say, when we had a little 8'10" trailer, I would want to burn the world if I had to back that thing up because the wheelbase is so small. Anybody who knows you've had a garden trailer, a small trailer, they will jackknife at, just like the touch of the wheel. And I think, having, a 29, 30-foot trailer, it is actually easier to maneuver than a small one. So that would be kind of my takeaway for today is if you have a travel partner, a spouse, a partner, get everybody on board to know how to do everything.
Probably wanting to talk about just knowing the rig a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, like part of this shake hill trip and knowing your rig, we know how to hitch and unhitch and you know how to level the trailer. Like what I'm talking about is what are you going to do if your electric jack comes out? How do you manually raise and lower the trailer? What do you do if your slide out, your tip out doesn't go in and out? How are you going to do that? And I have an understanding of how to do that. I'm not going to lie to you. If it ever happened to me, the tip out didn't come in, I'd have to look at the manual. But, I know where to look for the part on the trailer to bring the tip out in manually. I know where the adapters. So there's those little things. Pardon me with the mic. The other part, happy to talk about it later, but our electric jack is conked out, and I don't mean conked out. I mean, we went past, it wouldn't even operate manually, so there's what are you gonna do? We know where kind of the fuses are, all those little extra things you might look at once a year, maybe once every 2 years, probably.
Yeah, for sure. And that kind of led to a situation where we were in the middle of Calgary, I think. We had to stop at a really nice RV dealership where we bought a replacement jack. Let us use their parking lot in 10-degree weather to take the hour or two to replace the jack. So it's always good. Let's talk a bit about the height of the trailer.
The height of the trailer is really important. So, Dad made a wrong turn going through St. Louis, and he still hasn't been able to live it down. But as we came down this road, and we're not on a road we had intended to be on, there's a low overpass of a train bridge. We thought our trailer was about 12 feet, and whoever tagged the bridge said it was about 13 feet, and I'm not confident that they had tagged the bridge right. So there's a very narrow 20 seconds of is this gonna work or is it not gonna work? And the only reason Dad went for it is because The larger truck in front of them just squeaked under. And so I thought the trailer, pardon me, was 12 feet, and it's 12 and a half feet.
12 foot, 6 inches.
So I made it through with 6 inches to spare. But this summer we got on a detour in downtown Jacksonville. We were on a road we didn't want to be on, and we didn't intend to be on, and I'm at stoplights, I'm about to make a left turn, and as I glance to my left, I can see that the bridge is 9 feet, right? So having learned all this, knowing that I'm 12 feet tall, like, I did not take the top 3 feet of my trailer off. We made a right, we did a detour, saw more of Jacksonville than we intended to see, but we made it. And really, it's as simple as in your sun visor, you have a little cheat sheet, and we've got the height marked in feet, and we've got the height marked in meters, and we kind of get through it.
Yeah, so we never kind of have to remember, although I think we do now by this point. But let's talk about, some of those basic systems, the issue you had with your spare tire, some of the things that we might not think about when we're hitting the road.
Yeah, so like we've learned some of this the hard way, really. I will tell you that don't just assume that whatever equipment you have to change the spare tire in your tow vehicle will change the tire in your trailer. And so this happened to me this summer. I had to fix the tire. We had a bearing problem and a hub problem. I just assumed that if I used the stuff in a Ford F-150, it would take the stuff off a Sunset Trail, and it doesn't. And because I had a toolkit in the truck, I had basic toolkit that you could pick up at Canadian Tire or at Princess Auto, and it had some wrenches and screwdrivers and a hammer and sockets and whatnot. I was able to MacGyver something together and get it off. But I can tell you the big ad for us in 2025 for the summer is not a fancy new lawn chair. It's going to be a more industrious jack and a breaker bar, right? That's the exciting stuff that's going into our trailer, because you can have a great time on your trip with a bad lawn chair. You will not have a great time on your trip with a tire that won't turn. And if you want to hear about like the whole bearing problem, I'm happy to chat with you offline about that as well.
Yes. And I think, speaking of that, there's a beautiful hall over here just full of accessories and shiny, beautiful things and dishes and all kinds of fancy things. But I think if you were going to get into this lifestyle, there are a couple of very, very, very basic things you need. And that is like something to help you level your trailer, something to help you.
Hi, everyone. You might be surprised to see our faces sitting in a hotel room near the Toronto airport in the middle of this live stream. But funny story, in the middle of our live stream today, which we were using my phone to record off of, we started getting a lot of messages that our screen had gone blank. And what had happened was, in the middle of this live stream, our daughter had called. Very exciting news. This is the first time she's ever been legally of age to vote. And she had some questions about platforms that she wanted to talk through with us before she went to the voting polls. And unfortunately, that phone call coming through on my phone killed our screen for about 7 minutes or so we lost of content. And then, there was some lovely people in the audience keeping an eye on the live stream who were alerting us to the fact that they couldn't see our faces anymore. And so I was able to refresh the feed, and we got it back for the next 20 minutes. But I'm sure a lot of people probably gave up during those 7 minutes. So we do apologize for that. But we kept our notes. So we thought we would fill in the blanks, and we're going to insert this into the middle of the live stream. We'll splice it together. And then when that's done, it'll continue on with the regular show from the Toronto RV show. So all is not lost.
Well, we started this out by saying that there's confidence built through adversity, and we had adversity right in the middle of trying to talk about it. So yeah, let's dive into where we didn't leave off, but you might have got dropped off.
Okay. So what we were saying when the feed went dark was that, in terms of basics for your RV, we had spoke a lot about what sort of basics you need. And I think, essentially at the end of the day, it comes down to like 3 things, right? Like, for all of the fancy stuff that you can have, really all you need is something to level your trailer, something to protect the water system, and something to protect the electrical system.
Right. So you need a water pressure regulator, probably costs you less than $20 if it costs $15. You need a surge protector, and it doesn't need to cost a lot of money. I thought they would cost a lot of money. You can certainly find an expensive one, but we got ours for less than $100 on Amazon. Really important with the surge protector, because it not only protects your trailer, It also protects your electronics like your phone, your tablet, your computer, your TV, all that kind of stuff. So there's a bit of peace of mind, and you know, a little bit of money spent now saves you a lot of money in the future. The water pressure regulator protects against blown out water lines if there's too much pressure, and of course kind of soaking and flooding your trailer. So you kind of need those two things.
Yeah. And I would say the next section that we sort of missed out on, and that's kind of like the next segue into the next topic, is once you've sort of, got familiar with and understand the basic workings of a rig, well, what happens if you don't even own a trailer? Or what happens if you've never owned a trailer? What are some of the considerations that you might want to think about for somebody new who's just getting into the lifestyle on what type of rig to choose?
Right. I think the most important thing is far before you reach your financial budget, you're going to exceed your weight budget. So
Mhm.
you need to know what your tow vehicle is capable of towing. And that's going to be, you're going to do a little bit of research on that. You're going to have to figure out what size trailer you can purchase based on weight. So that's your number one consideration. Then I think you're getting right into length.
Mhm.
Length. So a couple of things. It seems counterintuitive, but if you're a first-time RV buyer, travel trailer buyer, a longer trailer is actually easier to back up than a shorter trailer. A short trailer is unforgiving. You sneeze and you're jackknifed. A longer trailer is much more forgiving and gradual, and so it's easier to back up. If you purchase a bigger trailer, the advantage is that you've got more convenience, more luxury, more room for everybody to spread out. You're cutting back on some of your camping options in terms of a campsite because you have a longer trailer, which means there's less campsites to select from.
Yeah. And I would say for that, the important consideration is know what kind of camping you want to do, like the majority of the time. Like if you know that you are just completely keyed up and very excited to always go to national parks, provincial parks, generally speaking, you're going to have a length limit to enter those parks just because of the configuration. The times that they were built, trailers just weren't sort of as big as they were, or sometimes these parks have been converted from tent only parks to accommodate trailers. And so you might want to stick with something kind of, 30 feet and below, 35 feet and below if you're going to primarily do that sort of camping. If your vibe is more like an RV resort, KOA type, kind of holiday type resort, you can probably get away with a longer trailer. And the only caveat I would say is we see a lot and we hear a lot about people like pushing the length limits of a site. And what I mean by that is they'll log on to the Ontario Provincial Park site and they'll see, these sites are marked for 35 feet and under, and they say, but in the description, the site is actually 50 feet long. So I am 40 feet, so I'm going to take that even though it says max 35. And I would caution people against that because one of the ways they determine the site lengths on the booking sites is actually not so much the length of the site itself, but it has to do with turning radius. It has to do with, hazards at the road, to make sure that you're able to kind of pivot and back into those sites. And
I think you want to think too well about, I know where we're headed because we've done this once already today. The longevity.
Yeah,
so,
that.
Obviously everybody, maybe you started out with a tent, a small pop-up, people purchase a larger trailer, and lots of stories of people wishing they bought something bigger. So here's our story. We went and we looked at a used trailer, we looked at a 27-foot trailer, and we looked at a 29-foot trailer. The price difference between the most expensive and the least expensive was $2,500. So we went with the 29-foot trailer, which was the most expensive. It was a bunkhouse. But not only did we just pick the larger trailer, which means we didn't want to upgrade again in a couple of years, which is a savings, we picked a bunkhouse model, which initially the kids were, 8 and 10-ish maybe. And it was a good spot to put them in the back with their crafts and their mess and close the door, and they kind of enjoyed to have a little bit of a room to themselves. As they got a bit older, it became great to have their friends and their teammates stay with them, and then it became a spot where the in-laws or Melina's parents could stay, and we would have adults in there, and that was great. And now we're just finding as they get to the next stage of their life, like we have more people in there. So that trailer has given us a lot of longevity, even though the family has grown and evolved. And so that has been a savings in and of itself.
Yeah. And I would say for us to like having the bunkhouse when we go camping, just kind of solo, just the two of us, there's a little table in there. Like it can turn into a really good office. Like having that extra space as you grow is sort of akin to having like a bunkie at your cottage. Like it just gives you that extra bit of space when you need it.
And we're pro bunkies because that fits with our family. But, you know, some people might prefer a fifth wheel, but they're always going to have to own a pickup truck. We have friends who, family of 7, lots of people.
You cover that when we cut back in.
Oh.
So I would say we're going to end it here. And you're going to hear about our friends who own a legitimate motorhome and talk about why it works for their family. So back to the regularly scheduled programming, I guess.
And here's to adversity and building confidence.
They don't use a tow, and they're okay with that. They love that unit, but they accept that if they forgot milk or they need firewood or they need to do something, that involves either A, getting on your bike and going to get it, or unhooking everything, packing everybody up and driving to the store. There's no wrong way to do it. There's something for everybody out there. Just have a good think about what you kind of travel you want to do. What are the experiences that you want?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And then, you know, once you're all set up and you want to get into that road trip mindset, especially, you know, with small kids, especially with growing kids, I think it's easier than people assume to go farther than they think. I mean, we've got it nailed down that if we wanted to get to the Pacific Ocean in 3.5 days. That's not everyone's jam. It's not something that everybody wants to do, and we have a couple of really long travel days involved to get us there because we're working with vacations from work. But I think it is easier if you can kind of, you know, have some tips and tricks along the way to help you. And I think slowing down on vacation isn't always about staying close. It's about, you know, really taking the time to kind of experience the scenery around you and stop and see things that you otherwise wouldn't. And one of the things that we do to help us along is we will use boondocking on our way to a destination to just give us some good overnights so we can get there quicker.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of us know what boondocking is, but if you don't, boondocking is camping at a parking lot, not a traditional campsite. You're in a parking lot, there's an etiquette, you're not camping, so don't get the lawn chairs and the yawning out, and if you need to do your tip out, be respectful. If you've got to tip into the parking lot, just enough to kind of get by and move around the trailer, but that's kind of what boondocking is, but the advantage to boondocking is, my goodness, it's like, the advantage to boondocking is that you're already hitched up, you just pulled off the highway, like the turn and burn time the next morning should be significantly reduced. So that's the advantage of boondocking, but we'll try this one. Like we talked about before, things like RV parking can really help you here, right? Because you can stay at a Flying J, at a Walmart, at a Cabela's. And so we actually don't stay at a lot of Walmarts. We'll stay at a Flying J, we'll stay at Cracker Barrels, places like that. You're always looking where there's a lot of other RVers around, places that cater to you. But what it does is it lets you get down the road quicker by not having to pull over, go to a state park or provincial park, set up, tear down, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, most recently, we've seen a lot of places like Walmart is a great example. We don't tend to stay at them because there's a lot that don't allow you to camp at or boondock at them anymore. And I think part of the reason is, you know, kind of availability of space, and part of the reason is, you know, people have kind of ruined the etiquette of boondocking, if I could say that. So maybe Dean, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I talked a little bit about don't put your tip out down, don't stay there a long time, don't tie up the whole parking lot, but I think probably that is the etiquette. The other thing I would say is don't park where a truck driver needs to park. So, you know, there's two reasons for that. One, the truck is loud and you're not going to sleep well. The other is there's only so many spots that they can park, and they're a valued customer of truck stops and other places. And if we take all of their spots, as RVers, we're over time going to lose those spots because they will ban RVers. So I would argue that you're going to have a better experience at a nice quiet Cracker Barrel, or in the dedicated parking at a Flying J, or at a Love's, or, you know, any of those places is going to be a much better experience boondocking. And of course, when you do that, the big thing with boondocking too is you're often close to those amenities that you need, like groceries and food.
Okay, so let's talk specifically about traveling with kids or grandkids, whatever it might be. So, one of the things that we will always do on a long weekend trip is we will pack everybody up, we'll finish work for the day, and we'll leave in the evening. And what we will do is, we know even if we're heading up to Lake Huron, if we're heading to anywhere, we will call ahead a few towns away and we will order a pizza. And we will stop and we will pause the trailer and somebody will run in and grab the box of pizza so that we can just eat in the car and continue on the road. And that difference could be us, leaving Friday morning versus leaving Thursday after work and getting 3 or 4 or 5 hours down the road to head, somewhere neat and new that we've ever been. I think with little kids, what we found was one of the best ways that we could keep them entertained was to give them any device that takes a photo. And that, sometimes it was just kind of the really old style digital cameras, it was iPads, and the benefit for that is they would be silent for hours and they would take all of these pictures outside the window and they would edit them and they would sit there with their iPad. And we have this amazing collection. I mean, our kids are 16 and 19 now, but we have this incredible collection of what our vacations look like through their eyes. And that was a special gift for us to be able to see how they saw the world as we were kind of rolling by. And I think that was something that really kept them entertained. Podcasts is another one. There's so many great podcasts geared towards kids. Brains On is a great one. Stuff You Missed in History class. I mean, you just look up and there's so many stories that are geared for kids that will keep them on point. One of the other things that we did a lot was, we borrowed from Dan's military career, and in the military they have these things called box lunches. And they're a nice little cardboard box that has everything you need in it for a balanced meal. And we started creating box lunches at night in the trailer, and we put them in a little cooler in the back seat for the girls. And number one, that prevented them from saying, oh, there's a McDonald's. I see that big M over there. Can we go get some fries? And they learned really quickly that whatever was in that box lunch, the treat, the sandwich, the pasta salad, once it was gone, it was gone. So it taught them a very valuable lesson about conserving their food and kept them entertained. If they wanted something to eat, they reached in and grabbed it. And I think probably the last thing that we did was we learned quickly not to give them every toy we brought at once. So meter it out. I would have a little bag at my feet, and every couple 100 kilometers, I would give them something and switch it out for something else. So they always had something new to look forward to. Otherwise, they would just burn through whatever was back there in 20 minutes and start crying. And I think probably the last thing is utilizing rest stops to the best of your ability. And I think we're all used to the kind of en route style rest stops that we have in Ontario, and the reality is, in the rest of Canada, certainly from BC where I'm from, and in most of North America, rest stops are not set up that way. They are very park-like. There's trails, there's picnic tables, there's maybe a couple of vending machines, but it's a place to get out and stretch your legs.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to the whole idea that as we think more about vacations as experiences and taking it, slowing down, the rest stop can even be part of that journey, right? We went through New Mexico on our trip on Route 66, and we pulled off the road at a kind of a rest stop area, and it was right on the Navajo Nation reservation. It had one-of-a-kind businesses. It wasn't a chain of rest stops. It was just their own unique stuff from that village and that community. That was awesome. I almost think it was later in the same day. It was in the evening. We pulled into a rest stop in New Mexico, and there was a bit of shade for the shade you can find in New Mexico. And it was hot, and there were these long-haired cattle near a fence, and Melina got ready to take a picture, and she had the fancy camera out, and one of the kids beat her to the fence and scared the cows away. No picture of it. No, you're just gonna have to take my word that it happened, but we don't remember what happened the rest of that day. But that trip's 6-8 years ago, and we still talk about those little things like that. And because they're so park-like in other parts of Canada, and they're not like an en route, a Frisbee under the seat will tire your kids out in 15 minutes, get them in the back seat, jam a little food in them, and you probably got 2 more hours down the road with them, right?
And I think even on long travel days, getting out and really stretching your legs more has a benefit. And Dan just spoke about Route 66. That was one of our kind of keystone trips that we did in 2018. And to Dan and I, we wanted to do Route 66 because of the lore of the Mother Road. There's so much history. But to our kids, it was like they knew and had researched all of the places that we could stop that inspired the Disney movie Cars, and we had to stop and get out of the car. And there was days where we stopped 5 or 6 or 7 times to see, some sort of landmark that was in the Cars movie. And the big treat at the end of them, for them, was to go to Disneyland and to see Cars Land at Disneyland. And those made, we had some days that we were probably on the road for 15 hours. And our kids were, 12 and 8 at the time, and did not complain a peep because they had their own little maps and they were looking for the next place that we were going to stop and where that was in the movie. And, so having those things, I mean, it was two totally different trips for them than it was for us. But having those times to stop really kind of helped us kind of frame that trip and make the journey the destination.
Yeah, and we talk so much about Route 66, but we have these great things in Canada too, right? If you've ever been to White River, there's a monument to Winnie the Pooh, and there's, I think it's a Robin's Donuts across the street. There's an A&W, but the Toronto RV Show pro tip, this is the big one. There is an amazing boondocking spot there. It's almost like a little park. It's kind of like a big turnaround, and really, there's a dump station. You come in, you spend your night. We just took a little time to explore White River on the way out, and we didn't spend a lot of time there, maybe 15 minutes, but there's all of these great things to do in Canada once we kind of get north of Barrie.
Yeah. And I think, earlier we talked about cost, and I think, we think about this a lot, but, when we're looking at kind of cost in time and cost in money, I mean, if you're comparing RV travel to, we live an hour and a half from the airport here, and, if we're going to drive an hour and a half, and then we have to be here 3 hours early, and then we can spend all kinds of money to feed ourselves and, sit at the gate and wait, and then we might have a 5-hour flight to Vancouver, and then we might have another 2 to 3 hours to kind of get to where we're going. Really, we could be halfway across the continent by the time all of that happens, right? And I think, when you sit down and actually weigh the cost versus, doing some of these hotel type trips, it really makes a difference, right? And I think we've learned to sort of, break our bias about, how we want to camp, right? When we started out, first of all, we were never, ever going to get a trailer. We were tenting, and that was the only way you were going to camp. And it only took one really bad rainstorm and a baby in a playpen and a river running through the tent to, convince us that maybe we need a little pump up, right? And, within a couple of years of that, we had a 30-foot, travel trailer. And, similarly speaking, we were never gonna not park at provincial or camp at provincial parks, right? That's the only way. That's wilderness, right? If you go to an RV resort, KOA, what kind of camper are you? And those are some of our favorite places to go, right? And so I think it's about, re-examining how you vacation, what you want to see, and just getting out there and trying something different.
Yeah, listen, most of the time when you go on a trip like this, if you're in a campsite, and when I say campsite, I mean a harvest house, a boondock, a campsite, maybe you're only there for 2 days. If it's really crappy, it's only 2 days of your life. It's not the end of the world. But I will tell you, once we broke our bias, it was so much more enjoyable. I am now the biggest unpaid proponent of the KOA, right? Camp at KOA, send your kids away, even at 19, they go and exhaust themselves, come back and go to sleep. But once we did that, we enjoyed the RV lifestyle more. Even so much as what I would say is consider a hybrid vacation. And by hybrid, I mean, we've talked about staying in the trailer, but we drove as far as Knoxville, Tennessee on our way to Florida. We stayed at the Holiday Inn Express and parked at the back with the trucks. Everybody went in, we had a good night's sleep, we had a shower, we had a free breakfast, we got back in the rig, and we kept on going. We went to Disney this summer. We stayed at the Disney campground, but we also parked at Saratoga Springs, and we went in and we stayed in a proper hotel room because we've been on the road for a couple of weeks at that point when we were down in Key West. So if you're looking for that other type of vacation and you have FOMO, fear of missing out, I just gave you 2 examples of where the RV can go to the hotel, right? Make it work. I think if I could get you to leave with one thing, there's no wrong way to RV and there's no right way to RV. Everybody here's got a different way to do it, and that's the most important thing. Don't worry about what everybody else thinks.
Yeah, and I would say, listen, if you love old Europe, we've been to Europe, Dan's family lives in the UK, and we have spent a lot of time traveling by plane, and if that's the vibe you want to go to Quebec City, go to St. Augustine, Florida, drive to Newfoundland and take a ferry to St. Pierre and Miquelon where you need a passport, because it's a French territory. If you like city vacations, goodness, go to Bonnie Creek Provincial Park and take the GO train into Toronto. We have camped at the foot of the Las Vegas Strip with kids, and they had an amazing time in Vegas. I think if you want to see the Swiss Alps, you can go see the Rockies and have your shoes blown off. I think there's Caribbean vacations. We call Dan Island Boy now after our RV trip to Key West. And I'm pretty sure he probably wants to live there. I'm sure in his brain he's still there. But I think, the point of it is, there isn't, in my opinion, a vacation, maybe aside from a cruise, that, you could have anywhere else that you can't replicate RVing. And I think that's super important. We even use our RV for, festivals, events. There's a huge culture of, camping at NASCAR and watching a race, or, we live 5 minutes away from the Fergus Scottish Festival in Highland Yates, and we camp there every year instead of sleeping at home. And when you look beyond the borders of what's immediately around you, I think you can have a really good opportunity to create some lifelong memories for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I just don't get pigeonholed into doing it the way you think you're supposed to do it. And we live in such a diverse continent that I would hope everybody could see everything that the continent has to offer, because my biggest memory of RVing is like, you can wake up in a forest one day and then it's the prairies and then it's the mountains, right? The landscape changes, and I do a lot of the driving, and that's just the part that I enjoy the most, I think.
Yeah. So that's it. I think what we encourage you to do is just, get out there. As Dan says, there's no wrong way to RV, and I say if you take a wrong turn, you're not lost, you just haven't got there yet. So thank you so much for sticking with us. Thank you for everybody online for tuning in. And we tend to put our podcast out every 2 weeks. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, the RV Canucks. We are also on TikTok, on Instagram, and we look forward to seeing you on the road. So we'll open it up if anybody has any questions. We do have the first 3 questions get a prize. I've got a couple of tote bags here and a t-shirt, so you let me know.
All right, I have a question.
Sure.
It's actually from Sylvia. So it was, what is one thing you bought in the beginning that you were surprised you never needed? And then there's a part 2 to that.
Okay.
Should I answer this?
Go for it, Dan.
I didn't know that was going to be the question, but I've had the answer waiting for the question, right? The same way you have a solution looking for a problem.
I'm nervous.
You should be. We bought our trailer, we went in, we picked up, the sewer hose and the adapter, and they had this thing called a tipsy stick.
Yeah,
They had this little thing called a tipsy stick, and you slide this little post into the sand, and it holds your drink and it holds your chips, right?
everybody hates that.
We never used it. Every year, I go into the trailer, and I take everything out that I don't think anybody uses. In the same way that you all went into your kids' bedrooms and cleaned out everything and put it in a garbage bag and they don't ask for it, I do the same thing and I don't tell anybody. And nobody ever asks for it. So for me, it's the tipsy stick.
Yeah, where is that, by the way?
I can't tell you.
So the second question, or the second part, is what's one thing you bought that you were surprised how much you use?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. The first question was, which Danny just answered, was what's one thing we bought that we thought we would use that we didn't use at all? And the second half is, what is something that we bought that we didn't expect?
Yeah, that you were surprised how much you use.
Surprised how much we use. Oh, that's a good one. I would say, you know what it is? It's the second set of leveling blocks. So we don't use the Anderson levelers. We don't use the little kind of half moon style levelers. We prefer like the Lego block style levelers. And early on, we bought a second set. We have had to use those so many times for unlevel sites that it is just shocking.
Yeah, because you're not going to use those at an RV park or somewhere with level pads, but we have used those at, I think we used them at Bass Lake Provincial Park, we used them at Finlayson Provincial Park, like so many other places where it's much more rugged landscape is where we've used them. And even sometimes remember I said it has more than one use. It's not just for leveling your trailer. Sometimes you need a little height on the tongue to get off or something like that. So those Lego style ones, we definitely get a lot of versatility with.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. You touched on Barber's Host.
Yes.
I've never been, never tried it. Can you? Is that the kind of place you would treat, say, that would not be able to get out of, or is it a little bit more extinct? In other words, can you get in, get out fast, and stuff?
Yeah, the answer to that is sort of, okay, so the question was harvest hosts. So do you treat that the same way you would boondocking, kind of in and out, or can it be more of an extended situation? And I'd say it's a little bit of both. Primarily you're there for a night, you know, sometimes hosts will allow you to stay for 2 nights. You know, there's certain really neat experiences. There's a number of like drive-in movie theaters that allow you to stay there, and that's kind of a one-night deal. But a lot of the times you can request an extended stay, and it's up to the host to determine how long that is. What I would say that's a little bit different is, you know, I wouldn't recommend a harvest host situation where you're just showing up unannounced. You have to book, and you have to kind of get them to approve your stay. So that's something that's important. So, you know, sometimes they may allow, you know, some last minutes where you're on the road in the morning, you think, you know what, we're gonna head there, and you can request, and if they approve you, you're good to go, but you sort of have to wait for that process. But it's not somewhere I think you'd spend a week, right? Yeah, and the great thing about that is, you know, Harvest Hosts recently purchased Boondockers Welcome, which was Canadian owned out of Aurora actually, and that allows you to stay in people's driveways as opposed to like golf courses and wineries and breweries and things like that. So the network is like, I don't know, there's almost 6,000 places to stay in North America, so it's pretty fantastic.
And maybe add to just to qualify it, I think of it like boondocking, but I would say you want to think about your stop, especially if it's like a business, like a restaurant or a winery or brewery. Time the arrival so that you can patronize the business, right? I don't think you want to roll in at 10 o'clock at night and leave at 7 in the morning. So like, if you're going to arrive early, like maybe that's part of the journey, the experience, and like what's the worst you're in for it? Like a sampler of beer, an extra bottle of wine, like it's probably not going to go to waste.
Yeah, for sure. So you should come on up and pick. You have a T-shirt or a bag, and you'll have to fight over it.
Yeah. You go during your travel from 10 to 10. How's your food?
Food? Oh,
From a tent to pop-up to now.
that's a great question. So the question was, from a tent to a pop-up to an RV, how has our food journey been? And I would say, I don't actually know if this is odd or not, but I can count on 2 fingers the times I have cooked inside my trailer. We do not cook inside the trailer. Not that we won't, it's just we are hardwired that we cook over the fire. We have a beautiful tripod, we use cast iron, we wash our dishes outside. Unless it's raining or cold or freezing, like we tend to wash our dishes with a pail the way we did. So I think that's kind of the one vestige we've held on to from tent camping and pop-up days is that we really enjoy eating outdoors, right? So it has to be really nasty weather, and we're maybe putting like a pot of soup on the stove to eat inside, I would say for sure. Does that kind of answer? Yeah.
I'd even add to that as well. It almost creates the environment where we slow down a little bit to cook. We use more fresh vegetables. We try something a bit different. So in that sense, we're probably eating a little bit healthy. Like we still like a good pie iron. We still like a good burger. We still do that kind of stuff. The other thing I would say is when we RV, we really try a piece of like cuisine that's local to the area. So this summer in Key West, it was alligator. And we've been in the south and had crayfish and catfish. And so, you know, it's not all about that. Like, we just like to try something new because, like, you're not going to find that in southwestern Ontario.
Yeah. Great. Well, I think that's about time. So thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, everybody online. We're going to end this live stream. Come on up and get your tote bag.
Grab your tote up there.
And, you know, if anybody hasn't got a magnet, we've got fridge magnets that you can put on your RV fridge that has a QR code. You can keep up to date with the podcast and with all of our social media channels. So thanks you very much, everybody.
Thank you and have a great weekend.